Yeah,
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Talkoffame podcast. I am dying to do this interview for a while because I've been following Tanish for a while and haven't done. And he's done incredible things with his platform. He's a host of Stopping Suicide Step by Step, which is a passionate, informative podcast dedicated to raising awareness about suicide prevention and fostering a supportive community. As many as you know, I have suffered with mental health stuff, so I'm excited to learn more about his podcast and talk about some mental health. And like, thank you so much, Niche, for coming on the podcast. I'm super excited to talk with you.
absolutely, Kylie. And thank you so much for having me on the Talk of Fame podcast. I'm very excited to talk about mental health and all things about my podcast.
Really, same here. And like, what is kind of like your aim and mission like when you started stopping suicide step by step? Because I know you started this recently, right?
Yeah, so I just launched it back in June, and then my main mission has been basically to create like a community of help, of self-care, of awareness and advocacy. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put myself out there and help others, and then in the hopes of that, the people who kind of listen to my podcast or follow me will, like take mental health awareness and advocacy like to the next level and just like kind of advocate and create awareness to it in their own, societies and communities.
That's so cool. Like, how long did you like work on a podcast? Like did you have the idea for a couple months and you did it, or how long did you kind of have the idea?
Yeah, so I've been actually having the idea to do it for such a long time. I've wanted to do it like since January of this last year, but with high school and all that other stuff, I've been so busy and preoccupied. So it's like been on my bucket list, and then I was like, okay, perfect. I have summer break. I'll do this. This sounds very like fun to do. I feel like I'll help people out of it. I feel like it'll be like just a great learning experience for myself too, because I've never done a podcast before, so it's fun.
Definitely. Like I was the same thing. Like I didn't start a podcast until like 2021. And then once I had my mind to it, I was like, I need to do this. Like this is I never done a podcast before as well. I
Yeah,
listened to podcasts and stuff, but I never like done it or
yeah.
anything before. So it was like pretty new. But once it started, you're like you just never stop doing it because you just enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I thought, and I was a little bit like just like that. Like I was like kind of like nervous. Like I was like, okay, I like is it gonna be kind of hard putting myself out there, like speaking, talking about like, maybe controversial or like kind of stigmatized issues. And yeah, I think it's like just the thing, like if I went once I put myself in there and just started recording and doing working on the podcast, I think it like became much easier. But definitely agree. Yeah. It's like I
Yeah,
think
like it definitely came like much easier. Like it once you keep doing it, because like once you first started, like, is this something I actually want to do? Like
yeah.
my time, especially being a high schooler, like it takes so much time and energy, especially being a high schooler and you basically don't have time, especially during the summer. Like you have so much time that you're like, whenever I get a chance, I'm going to record interviews as much as possible. And
Exactly.
so like once in the summer, like school comes, you're like, since when do I have a time to have a podcast on my time? Like, how is this possible?
Yeah. It's so hard like managing time, especially because a podcast, it's not an easy like it's not an easy work. It does take, a lot of time and like you because you have to like plan the episodes and then record them, or if you're having like a guest speaker, then like plan that, coordinate it, edit it. So definitely, yeah, it's really hard managing, like especially if you're a high schooler in school.
Oh yeah. And like what is like kind of like the most important thing you learned when you started your podcast?
Definitely. So I think just, and I know this may sound kind of like cliche or repetitive, but just, putting myself out there and just doing it kind of that helped me a lot. Because like I was really, nervous and I didn't really wanna like do the podcast because I was like, oh, how are people gonna react to this? Is anybody even gonna listen to it? Like, what's the
Hmm.
point of me, recording and doing all these things? But I think after a while, I think just kind of doing it and making sure I did it consistently and putting myself and pushing myself out there helped me a lot because it then once I started the podcast, I received some messages from some like listeners and stuff saying, we love the work you're doing, keep it up, and that has also really motivated and inspired me to continue going, especially because I know that like people out there who are actually listening to it are getting help out of it and they're getting benefits out of it.
Yeah, that's like the best thing about doing a podcast is that like when you have people listening to you and messaging you, this gives you kind of the courage to kind of keep going with our podcast. Like I was the same way at first. When I started this, I was like, is people actually gonna listen to this thing?
Yeah.
Like I just like was afraid that I was gonna use my time for no one to like
Mm.
listen to it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think like especially just putting yourself out there and doing it, because there are people out there like who might need, mental help or like even other types of, help, or they just want to learn stuff about like new topics. So, and I think podcasts, like if you have an idea for a podcast, even if it's like, not about mental health, just doing it and putting yourself out there and having, just that courage to do it, you're gonna find listeners. Like, trust me. Like
Oh
it's
yeah. Like no matter it's a topic, like, you're always gonna find at least one or two listeners
yeah.
that'll listen
Yeah.
to it. You just need that one listener to listen to at
Exactly.
least every episode.
Absolutely. And I think that means a lot too, having like listeners who are listening to the podcast, like interacting with you on social media, and they're really finding it helpful. And that truly makes a big difference in my day. Like, it's like, oh, wow, like I'm actually doing something like meaningful. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, basically when you hear people like asking you or telling you about these topics, you're like, is this actually real that I'm doing this thing right now? It's just like it just feels like you're living a dream. You're like your
yeah,
dream life.
yeah. Exactly. No, exactly. I completely agree.
And like how has the conversation around mental health kind of evolved when you started your podcast? And where do you kind of see it like heading in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, I started my podcast pretty recently, so there haven't been like any, major kind of shifts around suicide and mental health in general. But I do think with podcasts like mine, and other kind of organizations or advocacy works, I think just the stigma is slowly getting reduced because just if more people, talk about it, like my podcasts, or I'm just kind of sharing stories about mental health struggles. I'm talking about, what taboo topics in mental health. I think that just really helps alleviate the stigma. So I do think like my podcast has kind of helped with the stigma aspect a lot, especially in this past month.
For sure, like especially with like your podcast and many other podcasts out there, like suicide and like mental health is a much needed topic to
Mhm.
be talked about, and especially in 2023. There's a lot of people during like the summertime have a lot of free time and like basically always like cry or deal with mental health problems during the summer. I've been dealing with mental health problems during the summer as well. It's like when people deal with mental health problems, they're like, how am I supposed to find these podcasts or whatever to find resources for? And to think that there's amazing podcasts like yours to be out there and to listen to be educating, it's seriously much needed for people to hear. Because who knows, they might help someone else are dealing with that
Thank
mental
you so
health
much.
stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think podcasts do a great, way of communicating because especially because you're talking, you can like share your own personal experience, your own, personality, like maybe talk a little bit about yourself, your life, and then like talk about the mental health or suicide topic which you want to talk about. I think that's such a pro about the podcast because you can't really do that in like just like kind of like doing logs or like writing posts. I think just speaking about it makes a big difference.
It really does. And like, why do you think people like feel suicidal at all? Like when you're in your opinion, like why do you think like people feel kind of suicidal?
Yeah, so I mean, feeling suicidal can be due to a number of issues. Like, some people might be going through things like depression and anxiety because of, maybe like their family pressures or their school pressures. Maybe they're having other kind of like trauma or abuse situations in their household or in their life. And they may be feeling as if like committing suicide is just like the best way out for me, and like that's like the solution I need to do to kind of cure myself of the troubles which are going on in my life. And I think the biggest thing is like suicide is not the way out. Like there are so many other options, like therapy, which you can seek. And that's something I love to talk about. Even simple things like self-care for yourself, that makes a huge difference,
Hmm.
from like saving someone's life, that type of standpoint.
Yeah, like I know like with suicide, it does is not really the best way out. Like with self-care, or even go to like a therapist or maybe going on a walk or whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
there's many ways like to help yourself than commit
Yeah.
suicide. That's the worst thing about it. Because of course
Yeah.
you might be going through a lot in your life, and I have friends that have rough times in their life and have thought about it, and it's like it's so hard to hear when they tell you
Mhm.
about those things because they're like,
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine. You just really don't know how to help in that way because you really don't know like what you should do in that moment. But it's like when you go through that moment or you see your friends going for that moment, you just have to be there for them. Like that's
exactly.
really
Yeah.
the only thing to do is go be there for them and help them out as much as like you can.
Yeah, I think, being like there is like and being empathetic and compassionate to others, like friends or family members who are going through like a tough time, like or wanting to commit suicide is really helpful too. But I do think it's like important for us as kind of like advocates, mental health advocates, to recognize that like every story is different, and like going to therapy and talking about those things is really easy, but in reality it can be kind of difficult for people to
Hmm.
accept that fact and actually go to therapy and seek help, or they may lack the resources in their community to do that. Like for example,
Hmm.
I'm Indian American, like first gen or second generation, so my community is a little bit like stigmatized when it comes to mental health and suicide especially, so it's kind of hard for some certain communities to get like resources because of their stigma and stuff. So I think like every story is different, but at the end of the day, every story matters.
It really does. Like with me, like I'm a Jewish American, like a second generation Jewish American, and it's like my grandparents were in the Holocaust, like they were born in the camps, and like my nana like moved here from Germany, Poland, and like the Holocaust, and like just like I just went to the Holocaust Museum when I was in DC last week, and it's like to see Jewish people, Jewish Americans have to go through that, and it's like.
Mm-mm.
Are you
Yeah,
serious? Like, to be like a Jewish American, like it's like there's a lot of stigma like that, like you kind of see.
yeah.
But it's like that's a part of life if you're like a Jewish
Mhm.
American or
Absolutely.
American or whatever. There's
Yeah.
always some stigma that you have to
Absolutely.
go through.
Yeah. And especially I do think because of the whole like history that happened with the Holocaust and stuff, there are like so many instances of, like mental health. I'm assuming like we're maybe in Jewish American communities as they might be kind of like struggling to grapple with their loss and all that. So I completely agree with what you mean. Yeah.
And like, did you go through like any mental health issues? And so like, what was it kind of like for you like to kind of go through that?
Yeah, so I myself have suffered through stress and anxiety, and this was during COVID-19. This was 2021. And it was mainly because of, I was very isolated. I didn't have anyone to kind of talk to. I was having some other like personal issues going on in my life and some struggles during that time. So I also lacked the resources such as therapy and meeting with a professional too. So that kind of aggregated my own struggles. But I have gotten better, as in, like, I have practiced a lot of self-care. I've gone outside multiple times. I have kind of taken professional help, later on in life, or not in 2021. So I have like slowly gotten better, but I'm doing much better now.
That's such great news. Like with me, like I dealt with 2020, like when during the summer of 2020, my mental health got so bad that I was
Yeah.
literally on the couch
Yeah.
all day, every day to the point where I couldn't even walk. Like my because I was so depressed and I got so sick that my anxiety got me sick to the point where I
Yeah.
couldn't leave the house. And so like with like me, like I went to therapy when I was a kid, but it's like even when I'm like 16 years old, I always forbidden it because I'm like that kind of makes me, you know, a failure if I go to therapy.
Yeah.
But like that's like going to therapy, I realize is not like a failure. It's kind of like a strength to actually like
Absolutely.
realize
Yes.
that you have this problem to seek
Oh
some
yeah.
help. That's like it's not
Definitely.
like
Yeah.
you're like don't need to feel a bad person for going to therapy. You just feel like, okay, well, I'm doing the right thing, doing
Yeah.
something for myself.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with therapy. Instead, it's like a sign of strength, and it's a sign of courage, in my opinion. Because like if you're going to therapy, you're taking the steps, you're taking professional help to get yourself better. And I think I applaud people like honestly who do that, because it takes a lot of courage because of like societal stigma and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that you're also doing better because with your like depression and your other mental health issues, because COVID did hit a lot of teenagers and kids hard mentally.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Like, I'm doing definitely much better. There's definitely moments where I'm like, oh, life is just terrible and
Yeah.
just kicking me in the butt. Like the last couple of days, I kind of felt like that as well. But it's like everyone has those moments where it's like, what is going on in life right now that's kicking my butt? Like everyone has this is those
Yeah.
moments where like, okay,
Yeah.
what's going on?
It's very normal, like you're not gonna have like a perfect life where everything's gonna be like happy and amazing. Of course, you're gonna go through like ups and downs, but I think it's really important to remember that like you shouldn't just be going through the downs, like you should not just be feeling sad, isolated, lonely all the time, and seeking help professionally can be really, really good to do that.
For sure. And like when you were going through those times when you were depressed or anxious, like how did you kind of find the resources and like yeah, or have some things to do like when you're going through that?
Yeah, so social media really helped me. Like just certain like kind of TikTok accounts where I would find tips from professionals, like or like vent pages, and those really helped me. And those kind of also, inspired me, and they were in the back of my head when I thought of, starting my own podcast because I remembered the help I got and the social media pages that I kind of followed, and that really like helped me kind of create the podcast to make sure it, is appropriate and it helps others.
For sure. Like I know with like with so many there's so many content creators nowadays or like YouTubers that's like whenever you're going through something, there's always like a video that you can watch or a person that's
Yeah,
advocating. Like there's always
yeah,
that's what I really love about social media. It's like there's always something that'll help you, whether it's like videos,
yeah.
people, whatever it is. There's always someone to help.
Yeah, and you can connect with so many people who like might be going through the same thing as me. Because when I was going through like my stress, I would like kind of just talk or see other people and who were going through stress or like anxiety, and then I would be like, oh, I'm not like the only one. This is it happens to other people too. It's not like I'm like just the odd one out and stuff like that. And that also
Yeah.
was really, really helpful through social media.
Yeah, for sure. Like when like you talk about like your story on social media, like you receive so much messages saying like, "Oh, I've done the same thing. Like I felt the same way," and like it just makes you feel like less alone when you hear
Absolutely.
people talk about that. Like they gone through the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the whole social media, because it's kind of created like a support community, just like a big support network of, creators and podcasters and like advocates and then people who need help. And I think it's really amazing, like, because we've all kind of created this big community on social media that's, helping each other out, creating awareness, reducing stigma.
Definitely. And like what are like some resources for people dealing with mental health? Like do you have like any few in mind for people
Yeah.
like that are dealing with it?
Absolutely. So for mental health, I do recommend, and just an FYI, I'm not a professional or anything. I'm a high school student, so it's important to actually receive help. To contact a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, or counselor. But just some organizations which are in my mind are NAMI, NAMI, National Alliance like for Mental Health and stuff like that. That's really, really helpful, and that's a great resource. You can find their website online, and they have a helpline. They have resources to support you. They can connect you with, therapists and stuff like that. And then if you are going through suicidal, thoughts or you're having suicidal behavior, the suicide hotline and helpline is a great resource as well because you can get direct, confidential 24/7 like mental health help, and that's a really, really important resource to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, like I see like if anyone has like any of those problems, definitely reach out to those resources because like if you don't like get some help or talk to people, it's not going to get better. It's nothing. It's just like you should just ask for help, whether it's like talking to friends or talking to your parents. There's always someone willing to help, or if it's like going to a therapist or whatever. There's always a way to find help.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's so many resources, out there to help people. And there's like organizations, nonprofits, mental health providers. And I think that like as advocates, as we kind of like just talk about those resources and
Mhm.
share them, I think that's like the best way just to kind of like help more people.
Yeah. And like what is like the biggest thing people should do if like they're dealing with mental health?
Yeah, so I definitely think, talking to the first step kind of would be like, just telling if you're like a kid or like a teenager, maybe telling like a friend, telling a trusted adult, like a parent. But if you like, and then potentially, if you need it, seeking therapy and professional help is also really, really recommended, as professional help is the best way to, get treated and get better. And then professional help is basically just like psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, stuff like that. If you are like lacking those kind of resources at home, or if like the home environment is not good or something, I recommend talking to like a helpline. There is a national like helpline in the United States, and then you can talk to a mental health provider like confidentially and for free, like anytime, and kind of tell them about your struggles and stuff like that.
Ooh, yeah, definitely everyone check those out. Like I definitely I just love how like in 2023 like we have all these resources that our parents really didn't
Definitely.
have when they were
Yeah.
kids.
Oh yeah, and mental health has progressed like so much. So it's so so good like having more awareness and more people, knowing about mental health and treating it as a real issue and not like some kind of disorder and stuff like that.
Yeah. And like if people are probably listening to this episode and being like, hey, what is mental health? Like how would you like you describe like mental health?
Yeah, so I think mental health is just kind of making sure that there's a balance in your brain, and that the kind of the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions that are going on in your brain are, healthy and, normal, and are making you feel comfortable. And like mental health is kind of just, it's not necessarily like a physical thing. It's more of just stuff that's going on like kind of inside you. That's like the
Yeah.
best time to put it. Yeah. Sorry if this like explanation was not that good. I can't actually think of like a correct definition, I would say, for mental health off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's definitely fine. You did better than I ever could. No, you
But
did better than I would. But like, why should kind of we talk about mental health more often?
yeah, I definitely think because mental health is so real and it like happens to so many people out there. It is like it's not like it's just happening to a very, very like minority or a very, very tiny group of people. It happens to everyone. It can affect everyone, all genders, all races, all like people from all backgrounds. And I think that since people currently are talking, like even though they are talking about mental health, there still exists a stigma, and that kind of makes it somewhat uncomfortable for people to, talk about mental health. So I think the more we talk about it, the more we can reduce the stigma, and the more we can, be open and comfortable about having such conversations like we are today.
Totally agreed. And like the last thing I have for you is like, what is some advice for people that are dealing with like any mental health problems?
Yeah, so I think my advice would be just never giving up and remembering that, it is going to get better at the end of the day. Because there's so many times when we personally, even I felt like, oh, okay, whatever, I'll just give up. Like my stress and anxiety is just never going to go away. But that
Yeah.
wasn't true. Like I kind of helped myself. I reached out online in communities, and slowly and eventually I did get better. And, staying strong and staying motivated, that whatever you're kind of going through, you are going to overcome it. And like having a healthy mindset and a positive mindset is really, really helpful.
For sure. Like when you like deal with mental health problems from personal experience, like you oftentimes feel alone or feel like what is going on, like what is anxiety. But it's
Yeah.
like when you deal with those problems, like it's just sometimes in your head, like or well, sometimes it's in your head, or sometimes like the things around you will impact you mentally. Yeah, and so like when you deal with those problems, like anxiety will never leave you personally. Like
Yeah.
even though like you dealt with like your entire life or doing it at the time, like I learned that like even though you might not experience anxiety every single day, like you still have it as part of you. Everyone
Yeah.
deals with
Yeah.
anxiety in some type of
Yes,
way.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It's like it's never gonna completely go away. And it's but that's fine as long as it gets better and that you're feeling healthy. That's what matters. And it
Mhm.
can shape you, it's your own story at the end of the day. And I think it just makes you kind of unique, and it doesn't make you weird, it doesn't make you abnormal. Instead, I think it makes you courageous. It's a sign of strength that you're overcoming a difficulty.
Definitely. That's so well said. And I want to thank you so, so much for coming on. Like everything you're doing is phenomenal and is so much needed for everyone in this in 2023. I applaud you for everything you're doing. If you need anything at all, like any help or anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help in any way. And I really
Of
appreciate you taking time.
course. Of course. Thank you so much. And you guys can check my podcast out on Spotify and on Instagram. And I'm just over here, trying to expand my community, trying to help new people. And I really, really appreciate having this conversation. Thank you so much, Kylie. I
Of
loved having
course.
on the Talk of Fame podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much. You're definitely one of my favorite guests for sure. I definitely like that's for sure. And have a great rest of your day. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode as much as I did. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Bye.